everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of the podcast. Here at eToro, we have teamed up with Transfermarkt to look into a wealth of data to find out how clubs operate within the transfer market. We looked at factors such as whether clubs buy young and sell for a higher price, or is it typically to buy players from abroad? Is it to add the finishing touches to an already strong squad, or is it to focus just on their academy and homegrown talent? Today, I'm joined by Joe Cole, who will discuss some of these findings. Joe, who has played over 50 times for England, scoring one of the best individual goals the nation has ever seen, also made hundreds of appearances at club level for clubs including West Ham, Chelsea, Liverpool and Lille. Since retirement from the beautiful game, Joe has coached at Chelsea's infamous youth side and does punditry for ITV and BT Sport, as well as regularly writing for The Telegraph. Joe, how are you? Good to have you on.
I'm very well, Sam. Good
Fantastic.
to be here.
Well, look, we'll get going. And the first question is, from an investing standpoint, one of the biggest hindrances for investors is that they will quite rarely invest abroad. And actually what they'll do, they'll spend a lot of their focus in their own market and have a heavy home bias. In this report with Transfermarkt, you can see the benefits of buying players from other leagues to then sell for higher fees. The question around this is, how important do you think a club's scouting system is?
Well, a club scouting system is of paramount importance. It depends. I suppose the question should be, what is their scouting? Is it the old school boots on the ground type things? Is it getting on the phone? A lot of clubs disregard that. In fact, a network of players or ex-players, you can call someone up. What do you think of this player? And they can go there, put their eyes on them, and they have their expertise and that nuance, like the old-fashioned scout, if you like. And then you've also got some clubs heavily invested in the data, that want up-to-date data of every game, and that's important as well. And I just think if you're going to have a holistic approach to it, you can't, even if we've all the money in the world, you cannot extensively scout with both of them parameters, the boots on the floor and the data side of it. You can't do it for everywhere. So you can pinpoint certain parts of the world which are good. Like, I mean, there's, Brentford and they have had their links with the Scandinavian market, haven't they? It's been traditional. When Arsene Wenger come in, it was very much more, it was more quaint back then that Arsene Wenger had an insight into the French league, and he ended up bringing over Petit, Vieira, Anelka, Henry. So you just got to have a plan, whatever your strategy may be, and you've got to stick to it, because what will happen is results cause panic in football clubs, and we can have a real way-laid plan. Right, we're going to be dealing with this type of player, and we want someone from between the ages of 18 and 24, and they need to have played this many games, and this is, need to hit these stats on these type of things. Then all of a sudden, transfer window comes by. You lost a few games, a few players are injured, and you're getting agents ringing you up, basically like dodgy car dealers trying to sell your players. And that's, unfortunately, the best clubs are the ones that tend to not panic, stick to their plans, stick to their guns, invest in the scouting department. You also understand when they get a player right, don't just think about which players work, which player didn't work. We spent a lot of money on this player, for instance, it didn't work out for us, and then they might go and delve into why that went wrong. But I think as well, when you get a player right and things go, and they come in and they're good, and you sell them on for more, why did that work? Who was accountable for that player? What part? When you have your scouting meetings, who put their hat on this player? Who was confident? And you need to have a way of sort of marking it and a real strategy of doing it. And if you can do that, you'll be successful over a long period of time. You can always have flash in the pan scouts that go and find 3 or 4 players, and then they're just there on the day. But if you have a strategy backed up by data, but also don't disregard the eye of the footballing wisdom of the scout, and then if you put all them things together and stay in a plan, you've got something there. It's panic. It's panic at football clubs that causes the bad buys.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, 2 points that I got from what you just said there: strategy and plan, which investors will know are paramount to success.
Yeah.
Just before we do move on to the next question, how were you scouted? Was it a case of you playing down the park and the scout was there, or a bit more than that?
No, that's pretty much it. Playing park football, grassroots football for my Sunday league team, and that was what it was back then. You had, say for instance, a London team. They'd only really scout in London, in their area of London. Then there'd 3 or 4 guys that'd be going out. They'll have a working knowledge of the teams, the local teams, the best teams. Talk to people, because they didn't have the technology, the communications there, and then they'd like the kid will be playing there. They think he's a good player. Speak to the manager, find out where the parents or the guardians were, and they give you a card, exchange numbers, and then you get a trial for the club. They'd ask you to come in for a few weeks, and then there was nothing really planned other than that. That was pretty much it in a nutshell. All scouting, developing. Players come in. Sometimes they have one look at them, think, no, not for us, they don't come back. Sometimes I keep a look at them for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, year, and before they give them a contract. The contract would be a year, and it really wasn't worth the. It was just very much. It was the old days. It was just very much eyes on players back then. There was no real communications, and the good scouts were the grafters that would go and watch 2 games on a Saturday, 2 games on a Sunday, 2 games on a Friday night. Like anything, they do their homework, they do their due diligence, they build up a wisdom over years of watching young players. And I remember speaking to guys who scouted me, and as a kid, you'd be thinking, well, he's a really good player. He's a good player, but then his game would have been physically bigger and taller. And I remember talking, and then the scout would be going, no, he's not got a chance, because the scout would see the footballing intelligence and the technique, and also they probably look at the parents as well. Because if you're a really small kid, the dad's 6'3", the mum's 5'10", chances are he's so they'll look at that. There was none of this measuring bones and predictions of growth, which they do in academies now. Just look at the mum and dad and look at the kind of size and shape they're going to be. So back then it was very grassroots.
Yeah, different world back then. I mean, speaking of sort of grassroots and into academy, some of the top academies for producing revenue for the club include teams like Benfica, Ajax, even Real Madrid, actually, which I was a little bit surprised to see that they were at the top of that. But from a club's perspective, how important is it to have a good youth system?
I mean, them statistics, they don't surprise me with all the big names you read, because football is still a business, even at the young level. So the 15, 16, 17-year-olds who sign professional contracts, they're getting paid big money, and this changes these young men's lives. So straight away, from a child, really, that age, there is a business that looks on them as a commodity, and they're prepared to invest in that commodity by giving them good wages, good situation. Their family might be living in another part of the country. They'll be bringing them in. They'll be looking after the family. And that's facts of it. That's what it is. The kids, the players, they get looked at as commodities, as footballers, and that goes from as soon as they're getting to an age when they're going to start to affect the game in a professional game. That's what it is, and they're an asset, and the asset will go up, the asset will go down, depending on how they develop. So the big clubs, what they tend to do, you've got to have the structure, you've got to have the infrastructure in place where you've got the training facility, you've got the best coaches, you've got the best trained coaches. You're looking at all aspects of the player. You're looking at you're looking at the physical side, the technical side, the tactical side, the mental side, the lifestyle. All of these things will come in place. And if these big clubs who make the most money, they're able to give the most money to the academies to make these players. But ultimately, they get the best players in the country or wherever their scouting can get them because they can pay them the most money. And that is that's the facts of academy football now. It's a business, and football's big business.
Do you think? I mean, on that point, do you think a high performing club could actually perform without an academy, or is it just so essential now for all the reasons you mentioned?
No, I think it can be done. Brentford didn't have an academy for a long time. They was very creative with how they perceive their footballing business. There'll be some clubs in the lower league that they've been investing less and less into their academy because there's no disposable income. They've got to put the disposable income on buying a League Two centre forward who's going to keep them in the league, so they're just surviving. They have got no disposable income where they go, right, we're going to set aside 20% of our budget and we're going to invest in the local players, kids in our area, because they know come 15 or 16, if that player they do produce from the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, they're only producing him to sell him on to a bigger club for compensation. So it's not like they can develop it like say, for instance, a top club can buy a player at 15, 16, develop him for 4 years. He plays 100 games going out on loan. He's now an asset. So whatever it's costed them over the 4 years in wages, it clearly works because players have a value, but the lower league teams it's like they're spinning plates constantly. They can't invest into their youth academy, unfortunately, unless they've got an ambitious owner. And if an ambitious owner's coming in and he's got money to keep them in the league, develop the ground, develop the brand at the top end, but he's also a clever owner will go, right, we're gonna try and hold on to our players. We're gonna do this, do that, and we're gonna pay. Football and finances is intrinsically entwined. Like everything in the world, it's very much there's a money element to it, and a business element to it. But with football, the problem comes in when there's kids of that age, and also when at the other end of it, when you have it's so much part of the culture of people, and football means more to people. If you're a fan in the street of their team, they could have American owners or owners from Saudi or owners from Qatar or Abu Dhabi, but they still feel it's their club. Yeah. Their club, their grandparents have passed it down to their dad, who's passed it. So football is a very strange business in that sense. It's very big business, it's very corporate, but then on the other side of it, it's local and it means a lot, and it's part of people's DNA, it's their essence, and it's the fans and the people. They are the owners, the custodians of the club. So it's a tricky balance business.
Yeah, it really is, and it's quite interesting just on the aspect that players are commodities, and for example, AS Monaco have made a lot of money from selling players that they bought young and then sold on. I mean, Mbappe, you've got Martial, you've got Thomas Lemar, you've got Chouameni, for example, where they've gone for big money. So yes, maybe one of them came through the academy, but they've still got good scouts, good coaching. If you were a young player, Joe, would you be looking at how previous players at that club have done and want to see a clear path to success? Would that be in your decision making?
Yeah, it would be part of my decision. You'd be part of my decision making. A lot of that was when I went to West Ham. When I it was a great academy at the time. You had Rio Ferdinand had come through, Frank Lampard had come through. I had the path in front of me, and that was part of the reason I signed for him. Also, the part of the reason was the coaches and the scouts and the people around the club who were good people who treated me well. So that was the I suppose the structure and the infrastructure of the club. And thirdly was we had a great youth team and I could win things. And what's more, at 14, 15, you want to be with the only thing that was important to me. There wasn't no great master plan. I didn't have agents sitting behind me plotting my route to the first team at that age. It was, I'm happy at West Ham. Plus, they seem to bring players through. Let's sign there. I loved it, and that was pretty much it. But I think nowadays, a young player has he will a good top young player at 15. There's so much information out there now. There'd be pathways and there'd be considerations. And should we do this? And should we do that? Should we go to Germany and come back? There's so much can happen. The main things that, if our advice would be to any parents of aspiring young footballers, is always go with where the kid's happy, because that's the main thing. You have to remember they're still children at that time. So I wouldn't change anything from what I've done. I think it still applies for today. If my boy wanted to be a footballer at 15, 16, I'd be asking him, where are you happy? Because if you're happy and you play football, you'll progress. And there is no secrets in football. If you wherever you are in the country, in the world now, there's so many eyes on it. If you're playing and you're playing well, someone will pick you up.
Yeah, I mean, very, very solid advice there about the happiness, and I suppose that's key in many aspects. Moving on now, we're going to focus on Red Bull Leipzig, which came up a few times in the article and the report, which I think is quite interesting.
Was that banging? Yeah, that was my wife. She left though now. Yeah.
Okay. No worries.
That's right.
That's right.
Sorry.
I'll do that question again. Really interesting just on the happiness front, and it's very obvious for players that come through the youth ranks that, on the flip side, you hear about people losing love for the game. So I think that happiness is clear for that path to success. Moving on now and focusing on Red Bull Leipzig, who appeared in the article a few times. They've bought players outside of Europe's top leagues quite consistently. And actually, in the last few years, they bought 7 players outside of that top 5. So this strategy, we could say, is working well for them, as they haven't actually finished outside the top 4 for quite a few years, actually 4 years in total, and they're on course to make that 5. How important is it for a club to have a clear structure and blueprint when it comes to transfers?
I think the Red Bull model is interesting. They've got a clear. I think they're the most structured team. They've got a group of clubs that they move players between. They have a specific way of playing, footballing culture. So they everything's very streamlined. Now, I think as a business, the Red Bull model, I think, is for what it wants to achieve. Obviously Leipzig are the biggest team in the group. They've got an American influence, but that way of playing, you're going to be able to identify players easily because it's very specific in everything they do tactically on the pitch. So I think it's easier for them to identify players that can fit into them. Clearly, no player over the age of 28, 29 is going to be on their agenda. They want young players who can run because they play a physically demanding game. Whether they're 1-0 up or whether they're 5-0 down, they play the same way. Now that has its limitations because I think it makes, from a footballing perspective, I played against the Red Bull teams when I was in America, and it was very eye-opening because of the way they play, very structured. In this situation, we do this. It takes a lot of the decision-making out of the players' minds, I feel, playing against it. So I think it has a ceiling with that. I think the top teams couldn't play like that because you have to adjust within games. There's more of a rhythm. So, but that's why they think, right, we're not going to go for top players because top players are going to want to impose their, say for instance, they bought someone from Real Madrid and they bought someone from Barcelona who's experienced success playing a certain kind of way. It's harder to then integrate them into that way. You buy in players, Leipzig teams are a step up, they're going to buy into the system and then the system works. But I'll be stunned if a team playing the way that the Red Bull teams do ever win the Leipzig team, if they ever win the Champions League or even the German league, I'll be surprised, because I feel like you need a little bit more to win leagues.
No, interesting. There's a saying, and you've probably heard of it. I actually heard someone on Sky Sports News say it yesterday, that attack wins you games, but defence wins you titles. Now, you were part of the 2004-2005 Premier League winning team under Mourinho, which boasts the best defence the league has ever seen. I mean, Cech, Carvalho, Ferreira were all brought in the beginning of that season. What influence did these players have?
They were great players, great winners, great players put together. You know, the main thing is the players. You've got to have a strategy, you've got to have a structure. But it's got to be, they were great players. They come in. We was, a fantastic team. Prided ourselves on not conceding goals, and that started from the top right the way through. And so many factors to go for why a team is successful in whatever style they choose to play. But recruitment, we signed great players. We had a great manager, and you get on a roll. It's very, very simple. But sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a long time to do it. But it all happened very, very quickly at Chelsea, which we were very lucky it worked like that. Sometimes it don't. There's a lot of teams that waste a lot of money. But in the early days at Chelsea, there was more hits than misses in terms of how much we paid for players and their output and what we got.
As an Arsenal fan, Joe, you broke my heart with Chelsea many, many times. So I can't thank you for that. But moving on to, and actually still focusing on Chelsea, your old club has been the biggest spender since Bowley's takeover. Are you confident that their approach will lead to success down the line? Are there any risks of spending too much at once?
There's risks. There's huge risks. They've spent a lot of money. They've obviously got this strategy of buying the players, committing to them and paying it over the course of the contracts. This is new. These guys coming in from the financial world and with a sports background, they've got, it's new. It's no one knows. And I'm pretty sure even the people doing it, they don't know. They think they've done their due diligence. They've had a look at the structures. They've chosen a path. They've got a plan, and now this plan's going to be drawn out over the next 2, 3, 4 years. This season's not important for Chelsea in the scheme of things. This is a huge turnover the club's doing, and they had a massive ground. They had to spend massive money because there was a massive ground from Liverpool, from Man City. That's the benchmark. The 4 times out of the last 5 years champions. And Chelsea are still far away from them. So you have to spend money, because they're going to spend money. They just brought Erling Haaland in. So they had to spend money. They have spent money. Had they spent it wisely, time will tell.
Yeah, fingers crossed for all Chelsea fans out there. According to the report, Arsenal's return on investment has been pretty good over the last few years. Are you impressed by the job Arteta is doing? And how much of that is down to the club and Arteta having a clear strategy?
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to say very, very well done to Mikel Arteta, because he's come under fire by a lot of over the last few years. We have to also remember that he's already won a trophy. He's won the FA Cup in his first season. So he's a winner. He's been brave. I thought he handled Aubameyang fantastically well. Big player for the club, Aubameyang, but he wasn't capable of doing what Mikel wanted. And he dealt with that. I thought he's brought the young players on. Fantastic. I've got nothing but praise for him. My only concern for Arsenal with the second half of the season is the mentality of the team. And I don't mean that derogatory to the players, because I think some of my favourite players are playing for Arsenal. I love watching Odegaard. I love watching Saka. I just think they're playing on a passion. They're playing on an energy. And they're playing on the edge. The manager looks like he's on the edge constantly. And that's something they need to come through. They need to come through a bit of fire before I can finally say that I think they'll win the league. So they've lost this game. They got Man City in a few weeks. I think the Man City game is going to be a real. That'll be tell me whether this Arsenal team can they keep their composure in that game,
Yeah.
and if they can, then I think they can
Yeah,
do it.
big test, and I guess in the short term memory, we can say Arsenal are sort of up and coming to chase the title challenges of recent years, and another team that's up and coming, you could potentially say, is Newcastle. I know obviously they're a very historic club and so on, but I'm talking about right now. Let's say
Yeah,
you were in charge of Newcastle, whether that be the manager
yeah.
or transfer director, whatever. How would you play it? I mean, they're in a situation where money seems unlimited and they want to challenge
Yeah.
Europe's top elites in the years to come. Would you buy young players, buy experience, buy homegrown, abroad? What would be the Joe Cole plan to succeed?
I wouldn't be much different to what Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe's doing. I think they've done a great job. I think Dan Ashworth as well, what he done at the FA to what he done at Brighton to now what he's doing at Newcastle. I think he is, he'd be. I know him a little bit, Dan. I've met him a few occasions. Very impressive man. Really good at his job. I think he's done it well. They bought smart. They got a coach in Eddie Howe who seems to get the best out of players. He's done a great job at Bournemouth. I think he was harshly judged at Bournemouth really after he got relegated, because what he done there was nothing short of miraculous at a club like that. And the last season soured it for him a little bit. But I wouldn't be doing much difference than what I was doing. I think they've been smart. They seem to have got the structure at the back right. Buying younger players, I think, is the next. I would be them if I was Newcastle now. I'll be scouring the world and going to get. I'll be scouring the world and getting the best players under the age of 21. And you'd have to pay them a premium. You'd have to pay a premium for them. I say, look, come here and be part of this project, and we'll develop with you. You might not be good enough to go into a Man City and play straight away. Like, I think that Alvarez signing at Manchester City, that
Yeah.
type of player would have been perfect for Newcastle, just on the cusp of that greatness. One of the best young players, and we'll bring them in, become a hero there, with a spine in the team that they've already got. I'd also be looking at players like Conor Gallagher on the fringes teams at Chelsea and say, look, do you want to come and be a huge part of it here? They've got to identify players like that, which I think they're probably doing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what a club to be a hero at as well with their fan base.
Yeah.
Okay, and now moving on to our last question, just before the quick fires to finish. In investing, there's a big word everyone tries to avoid, which is FOMO, fear of missing out, buying something when really you should hold off. Do you like to see clubs not overpaying for players where they might have a value and refuse to go over it? Or do you think if a club wants to buy the player, they should just go out and pay whatever it takes to get them? How can the club find that balance?
Yeah, well, the clubs, but you've got to be very disciplined. Like you have to in investing, I suppose it's the same thing. And like, because of the unique nature of football, where it plays on your emotions, it plays on the owner's emotions, his ego, everything will come into play, and they'll all be sitting there, and it's exciting. It's been proven to be exciting because of the game Championship Manager. How addictive was that for everyone? So imagine that. That's effectively owners and people sitting on that board are playing that game for real, and the thrill of winning a game, the thrill of being right on an investment, the thrill of something like that is what drives people. You have to be disciplined, and a player has a price, and if it's above that price, then you have to go to player number 2 on the list, player number 3 on the list, player number 4 on the list. And you just have to be very clear in your mind the value of the player and what you can afford.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wise words. Okay, look, we've got 3 quick fire questions to finish. Obviously, you can take your time in answering them. But number 1, how much do you reckon a prime Joe Cole would cost in today's market?
Oh, that's a difficult question. The market's changed completely.
Yeah.
You can't. I couldn't give you an answer and be humble. Because no matter what figure I say, it's going to sound like you're having yourself. But I suppose I'm a similar player to like a Mason Mount. I could say Jack Grealish, but Jack's the most expensive player apart from. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to put a price on it. Yeah, I mean, I'll have to dodge that question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good answer. I'm going for 100 million anyway.
Take that.
But
I wouldn't mind
yeah.
10% of that.
Yeah, exactly. Next question, and there's a few players that are in this bracket. Do you think a big price tag can have a psychological impact on a player?
Yeah, so much can have a psychological impact on play, and that's why when you're investing, that's why when football clubs are investing in players, they need to remember they're investing in human beings and not a product or a commodity. Because you can buy a player, for instance, who's worth the money, you get a good deal, he's a great player, something might happen in his private life, that might switches it, that's without the physical injuries, and that's, he might not settle at your club for some reason. His wife might not settle. His kids might not settle. There's so many factors that can, So definitely, without doubt, the price tag plays a part. Plays a part on the factor, the risk factor of signing a player. Can they deal with that like that sort of level of expectation?
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, if you were a teenage prospect playing outside one of the sort of the top 5 European leagues, would you want to go straight to a big club first, or would you want to go to, and no disrespect to these clubs, like a Brighton or a Red Bull or an Ajax, where you might be guaranteed more minutes, and then get your big move after that? How would you want to play it?
I think, like I said, this is hard for me to answer that question as thinking of how I thought as a 16, 17, or 18-year-old man, because the amount of mistakes you make at that age, I would probably at that age myself go, right, I want to go to Real Madrid, Chelsea, Man City, because I'd be thinking I could go straight in there. But if it was my son, who's a talented player, I would now, with the knowledge I've accrued and how what I know about the game, I'd probably say, go somewhere where they've got to develop you, like a Red Bull, like an Ajax, like a Brighton, like a Benfica. Go somewhere where if they pay you big money, it's in the coach's interest, the director of football's interest, the owner's interest to make sure that you play well. If you go to a club where they're buying 5 players in your position, then it's all on you. And sometimes when it's all on you, it's great, but sometimes it's still out of your hand. Because if the manager thinks player B is better than you, or player C is better than you, they're going to play, you're not going to play minutes, and it's going to stunt your development. So my advice if it was my own son, would be to do it that way. But knowing myself as a 17-year-old, I would have done it completely the other way.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I can imagine many people would be the same. Look, Joe, it's been fantastic to have you on and get your insights into all of these points. And I think, from an investing standpoint, there's a lot of comparisons we can draw from the investing world to the football world, and this report with Transfermarkt too. So, Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sam. Enjoyed it.
Take care.
Take care.